Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishna Namaha Asato ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityoramaamritangamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God Incarnate. Let us pray to Him to lead us from the unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. We have been studying Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and today's topic I have chosen from the Gospel, which is very important, and that is laying the foundation for spiritual life. Laying the foundation for spiritual life. Unless you give attention to laying the foundation, how can you ever think of spiritual development? The more and more we are involved in the tremendous activities of the world, the mind gets extremely loaded with worldly samskaras. And if a person is living the life in that fashion, he will be utterly worldly, and he cannot think anything but worldly things. It is just like a person handling kerosene oil all the time. His whole body will be smelling kerosene only. Even if he applies detergent and takes bath, still some percentage of kerosene smell will be always there. It is just like that. Repeatedly involving yourself in worldly things make your whole personality simply worldly. And it does not end up there. The reaction of the worldly samskaras is to make you more and more binding to the world, and will make you more and more suffer in the world. You will not be able to get rid of that. So such is the dreadful delusion that we are facing in modern times because of a total neglect of spiritual education, and so we are reaping the consequence of that. Sri Ramakrishna very clearly says in the Gospel, at beginning of spiritual life, one should think of sin and how to get rid of it. In beginning of spiritual life, one goes in roundabout way and suffers a great deal. Fire of knowledge destroys enemies of spiritual life. All these are clear warnings given by Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel. If you want to save yourself from the hammering of the worldly way of life, you have to think seriously about spiritual ideas, and in a determined way you must pursue the spiritual path. All the loaded bad samskaras have to be uprooted before you can expect any result in spiritual life. So that is the introduction part. And Sri Ramakrishna has clearly paved the way for spiritual path. Out of infinite mercy for the humanity, Sri Ramakrishna came and gave the message of spirituality, practical Vedanta. So what exactly is a spiritual life? Strictly speaking, spiritual life means living in the spirit as distinguished from living in the body and mind. There are two positions about every individual: the apparent man and the real man. There's a talk by Swami Vivekananda in Jnana Yoga, apparent and real. Please read that. This Mr. So-and-so, father, husband, who goes about, does his work, earns money, competes in society, in countless ways you may describe him. He is the apparent man. The other position about the same person is that he is pure spirit, nobody's father or husband, doesn't work or earns money, doesn't move, he is not born, does not die, and is not qualified by anything. This is the real man. When one discovers this ultimate fact of existence through direct personal realization, he enters into the true spiritual life. The life which the devotees of God live after having seen Him, that's also true spiritual life. Now, these two may be said to be the connotations of spiritual life from the absolute standpoint, but normally we do not use the words spiritual life in this absolute sense. We use it in a relative sense. It has been known from the teachings of the great masters of the world that there are ways of life through living which one can in due course experientially know the Spirit or see God. Living this life of discipline, which will surely eventually lead to direct realization, is also called a spiritual life. When we speak here of laying the foundation of a spiritual life, we use the term in the latter sense. The architect may give the plan for a magnificent building, but the engineer has many things to do before he can actually lay the foundation. First, he has to clear the grounds. Second, the greater the structure is intended to be, deeper within the earth, and in more spacious area, the foundation is to be laid. Those who want to build their spiritual life have also first to clear the grounds on which to build it. Further, if they desire to build a magnificent spiritual life, a life which is steeped in God, they must lay the foundation deep in life itself and on a comprehensive area. Some aspirants are apt to think that they would not waste time to clear the grounds for building a spiritual life, but would go straight and just build it. And perhaps they can quote examples where people have succeeded in doing so. What they may not realize is that in some cases, most of the clearing of grounds may have been done in a previous life, or one may have received grace of a world savior, such as Angulimala in the case of the Buddha, Mary Magdalene in the case of Lord Christ, Jagai and Madhai in the case of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Girish Chandra Ghosh in the case of Sri Ramakrishna. These are supreme exceptions of the religious history of man. You do not start with expecting windfalls if you are a hard-headed aspirant. You go by the ascertained and the prescribed way. You do not go by the way of the gambler. If you are not for building your house of spiritual life from roof downwards, you must know how to clear the grounds first. In terms of spiritual life, clearing the grounds will mean creating an inner climate. The Kathopanishad beautifully sums up the whole requirement in one verse. Navirato tushcharitan nashanto na samahitaha nashanta manaso vapi prajnanenaina mapnuyat. That is, he who has not first turned away from wickedness, who is not tranquil and subdued, and whose mind is not at peace, cannot attain Atman. It is realized only through knowledge of reality. The first requirement, therefore, is to turn away from wickedness, overt or covert. It is not a posture that is being advocated here, but inner penance. You must recognize what is wickedness. There is no point in simply covering up the wickedness, trying to defend the weaknesses. No. Be very definite and be very determined. Then only we can pursue spiritual path. You have to figure out what is it that's bothering you in the mind and just try to find out the ways and means to get over it. The aspirant must desist from all sinful acts and remove all wickedness from his heart. And he must sincerely live an ethical life. There is no entry into the inner precincts of the spiritual life except through the portals of ethical living. There is persistent downgrading of ethical living everywhere in the world today, in many spheres of life. It is very unfashionable in some quarters to be ethical. Pragmatism, hedonism, and dialectical materialism exercise great fascination on many minds. Notwithstanding all this, there is no getting away from the fact that ethical living is the foundation of spiritual life. There is indeed such a thing as going beyond ethics. That is, however, not to say that you go beyond ethics without starting to be ethical. One goes beyond ethics only when ethical living has become one's involuntary movement of nervous system, as it were. In Hindu teaching of Samanya Dharma, or ethical virtue to be practiced by all irrespective of caste or stage of life is given. And they are absence of anger, elation, indignation, avarice, delusion, vanity and enmity, speaking truth, moderation in eating, refraining from exposing others' weak points, freedom from jealousy, sharing one's good things with others, sacrifice, straightforwardness, gentleness, quietude, self-control, friendliness with all beings, absence of cruelty, contentment. These form approved conduct for men of all stations of life. Observing them duly, one becomes universally benevolent. And these are said in Apastamba Dharma Sutra. All these are mentioned. Buddha's teachings insist on avoiding 10 evils. All acts of living creatures become bad by 10 things, and by avoiding 10 things they become good. There are 3 evils of the body, 4 evils of the tongue, and 3 evils of the mind. The evils of the body are murder, theft, adultery. Of the tongue, lying, slander, abuse and idle talk. Of the mind, covetousness, hatred and error. I exhort you to avoid the 10 evils, Buddha says. It is in the Gospel of Buddha. In the 10 commandments of the Old Testament, it is taught, I the Eternal am thy Father. Thou shalt not have other gods before me. Thou shalt not take God's name in vain. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear a false witness against a neighbor. You shall not covet anything that is neighbor's. These are the 10 commandments. Thus we have directions how we have to do the ethical living. In ethical living, we have to practice 2 sets of virtues. One set of virtues may be called self-chastening. The second set as other regarding. When properly practiced, the first set of virtues chastens our unregenerate self, and the second set helps us to grow in harmonious relationship with others. In the verse we just quoted from the Kathopanishad, we noticed that it is not enough to only turn away from wickedness. We also require to be tranquil, subdued and peaceful in mind to be able to build our spiritual life. Tranquility and peace, which are the prerequisites for spiritual orientation of life, may not be attained as an immediate effect of desisting from evil ways of life. Something more will have to be done. There are 3 sets of Buddha's teachings which will be greatly helpful in this regard. In Samyutta Nikaya, Lord Buddha says that in order to get prepared for meditation, one must get rid of 6 things. Craving for sense pleasures, ill will, sloth, flurry, worry and suspicion. Sermons and sayings of Buddha. It is written like this. Those who do not know how to get rid of these 6 things cannot have inner tranquility. They will be always jumpy, nervous, unsteady and tense. They will be unable to control their minds. An uncontrolled mind cannot be concentrated. Without concentration of mind, there is no meditation. Without meditation, how can there be a spiritual life? So, the Buddha says that in order to get prepared for life of meditation, one must get rid of these 6 things. Craving for sense pleasure, ill will, sloth, flurry, worry, suspicion. There may be different ways of getting rid of these things. One sure way, however, of getting rid of all these through a single method is to desist from identifying oneself with the body and the mind and think of oneself as pure spirit, what one really is. I am that Atman, totally independent of this body-mind mechanism. To establish oneself in that position strongly is a way. This is not an easy medicine to take, but an absolutely sure one which will cure us of these 6 ailments in one stroke. Those who cannot take this strong medicine, let them take a simple but equally powerful one. What is that? Let them pray in a simple heart for love of God or bhakti. Bhakti is a sure antidote of all these 6 things. Sri Ramakrishna says, when does the attraction of pleasures of the senses die away? When one realizes the consummation of all happiness and of all pleasures in God, the indivisible, eternal ocean of bliss. Those who enjoy Him can find no attraction in the cheap, worthless pleasures of this world. Again Sri Ramakrishna says, he who has once tasted the refined crystal of sugar, he who has once tasted the refined crystal of sugar candy finds no pleasure in tasting the dirty treacle. He who has slept in a palace will not find pleasure in lying down in a dirty house. The soul that has tasted the sweetness of divine bliss finds no happiness in the vulgar pleasures of the world. Sayings of Sri Ramakrishna. Prayer awakens the subtle powers within a man, says Swami Vivekananda. Ill will, flurry, worry and suspicion, which are nothing but signs of weakness, are easily taken care of by the awakened power through prayer in an aspirant. Some of abiding worries and flurries arise from our stubborn refusal to understand and accept certain facts and forces of life. Lord Buddha says that in order to create a proper inner climate of tranquility and peace, one should accept and contemplate on these 5 inevitable facts of life. 1. Old age will come upon me someday and I cannot avoid it. 2. Disease will come upon me someday and I cannot avoid it. 3. Death will come upon me someday and I cannot avoid it. D. That is 4th. All things I hold dear are subject to change and decay and separation and I cannot avoid it. And the last one, I am the outcome of mine own deeds, and whatever be my deeds, good or bad, I shall become their heir. H-E-I-R. The aspirants who accept wholeheartedly these 5 inevitables of life will have their worries and flurries considerably reduced, and they will know how to live in peace with themselves. While living in peace with oneself is of singular importance to start in spiritual life, equally so is the need of living in peace and harmony with others. In a place where everyone seems to be against you, where there is no understanding of any sort, but quarrels and dissensions prevail, whatever inner climate you may have created for this life, that will stay largely ineffective when the outer atmosphere is hostile. Hence, we require to create an atmosphere of peace and harmony around ourselves also. How can we do it? Can we really create such an atmosphere by some deliberate actions? Why not? If we can create quarrels and dissensions by deliberate actions, then why can we not create an atmosphere of harmony and peace also by adopting some measures? Lord Buddha teaches in the Kausambiya Sutta that this can be done by thoughts of goodwill sincerely harbored, words of goodwill sincerely uttered, sacrificial living as distinguished from acquisitive living. Tyagapurna Jivan. That's the meaning. It is not difficult to have sincere thoughts of goodwill and sincere words of goodwill for those to whom you are selfishly attached. Commonly, people do also sacrifice their personal interests for those whom they consider their own, family-wise, community-wise, or country-wise. But what the Buddha means here by saying thoughts of goodwill sincerely harbored is that one who works for peace and harmony, in him there will be thoughts of goodwill for all without any exception whatsoever. He will be incapable of having thoughts of ill will for anyone. He will have universal goodwill for all people and in all seasons. Words which spring from such a heart will always be only words of sincere goodwill. One who has succeeded in cultivating universal goodwill, his actions cannot but be for universal welfare. Universal goodwill, however, is not easy to attain. Much self-chastening is necessary for that. Without the quickening of spiritual consciousness and development of good intent, it can't be attained. There are two prayers in the Vedas which are significant from the standpoint of developing the psychology of universal goodwill for all. One prayer is named the Gayatri, the famous Gayatri, and the other Shiva Sankalpa, the hymn of good intent. In the Gayatri, which occurs in Rig Vedas, the prayer runs like this: Om Bhur Bhuvassuvaha Tatsa Vidurvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Diyo Yo Na Prachodayati. The meaning is, we meditate upon the adorable effulgence of the resplendent vivifier, Savitri. May he stimulate our intellect and quicken our spiritual consciousness. The hymn of good intent, that is Shiva Sankalpa, which occurs in Shukla Yajurveda. This hymn on mind and goodness of its intentions reveals a rare spiritual insight of the early Indo-Aryans, who rightly found out that without divine grace expressing itself within us as goodness of intentions, no firm foundation of spiritual life could really be laid. So they prayed fervently in this beautiful hymn. That mind, the divine, which when one is awakened or asleep, that mind, the divine, which when one is wakeful or asleep, reaches far, which is the far-reaching light of all lights, may that mind of mine be of good intent, by which the active and the wise perform the duties in sacrifice and intellectual activities. That which is the wonder being inside the beings, may that mind of mine be of beautiful intent. That which is knowledge and fortitude, that which is immortal light within all beings, without which no act is done, may that mind of mine be of auspicious resolve. That which directs men like a good charioteer, directing the horses with reins, that which is established in the heart is immortal and swiftest. May that mind of mine be of good intent. So these are written in the book Indian Heritage, written by Dr. Raghavan. Prayers like Gayatri and Shiva Sankalpa lead to clarification of intellect and opening of understanding in a new way. This new opening of understanding, which automatically reshuffles our sense of values, can alone enable us to have sanmati, that is good intent. Satmati, sanmati. Sanmati means mati or proneness towards that which is sat or real. It is only after having attained sanmati, proneness to the real, we take the most important step in the groundwork of spiritual life, and that is changing the gravity of our life from pleasure seeking to truth seeking or God seeking. The vast majority of people who are religious, so-called, never take this important step in their life. They use religion for gaining what may be called God's groceries, but not God himself. Not until our minds have turned away from God's groceries and have been fixed on God for his own sake, we have started in the spiritual life. By changing the gravity of his life from pleasure seeking to God seeking, the aspirant has set his whole life process in perspective. Now he has to get the instruments of spiritual practices, sadhana, ready. What are these instruments? These are his own body and mind. This, our body-mind complex, creates no end of difficulties on our spiritual path. But by observing certain disciplines which Patanjali calls Sarvabhauma Vratam, Sarvabhauma Mahavratam, that is universal great vows, we can so transform this psycho-physical organism that it becomes the most helpful instrument for the realization of God or attainment of illumination. Such is the experience and teaching of the spiritual masters. Now, what are these universal great vows as stated by Patanjali Maharshi in Yoga Sutras? He narrates these vows as a first limb of his Ashtanga Yoga, calls them by the general name Yama. He defines Yama in his Yoga Sutras: Ahimsa Satya Steya Brahmacharya Parigraha Yamaha. That is, Ahimsa, non-killing; Asteya, truthfulness. No, Ahimsa, non-killing; Satya, truthfulness; Asatya, non-stealing; Brahmacharya, continence; Aparigraha, non-receiving. These are called Yama. Non-killing, Ahimsa; truthfulness, Satya; non-stealing, Asteya; continence, Brahmacharya; non-receiving, Aparigraha. So, these are called Yama. In the next aphorism, Patanjali says, Jati Desha Kala Samayana Chinnaha Sarvabhauma Mahavratam. The Sutra number 30. These unbroken by time, place, purpose and caste rules are universal great vows. You may be the follower of any religion. You may have chosen any of the yogas as your path for attaining illumination. But if you intend to advance toward the great goal of life by sure steps of deliberate disciplined living, then in conventional or unconventional form, you must practice these universal great vows or the disciplines of Yama. Ahimsa, non-violence, is said to be the supreme form of righteousness because it presupposes attained excellence in many other virtues like self-restraint, conquest of anger, hatred, jealousy, goodness of heart, generosity, non-egoism, sincerity of purposes, and determined dedication to a higher law of life. Violence in thought, word or deed can only lead to greater violence. Not only that, violence destroys the finer sensibilities in a man and throws his inside into utter confusion. He becomes rough and gruff and quickly manifests many demoniacal tendencies. His spiritual qualities get shattered. Whereas the man who is established in non-violence quickly makes spiritual progress. The secret is simple. Violence is awesome wastage of energy. The non-violent man conserves that energy and puts it to a higher purpose. Further, as Patanjali points out, ahimsa pratisthayam tat sannidhau vairatyagaha. Beautiful sutras. When a person is established in non-violence, in his presence all enmity cease in others. They all become friendly. In other words, such a person always carries within him a potent power of peace. This peace is spiritually creative, not only for the man who is established in non-violence, but also for all those who live in that atmosphere. Satya, or truthfulness, has no substitute in spiritual life. Without strict adherence to truthfulness, the foundation of spiritual life just cannot be laid. The efforts of building of spiritual life without truth will be as successful at any point of time as trying to catch the wind in a net. In Mahabharata, there is a long tribute of truth in which it is said in Shanti Parva, truth is the duty, truth is penance, truth is yoga, and truth is the eternal Brahman. Truth is said to be the greatest sacrifice. Everything depends on truth. In this tribute of truth in the Mahabharata, it is pointed out that there are 13 forms of truth. One who is sincerely devoted to truth manifests all these forms of truth in himself. What are these 13 forms of truth? They are listed: impartiality, self-control, non-envy, forgiveness, modesty, endurance, goodness, renunciation, meditation, dignity, fortitude, compassion, and non-violence. In other words, all the virtues or spiritual qualities in a man draw their substance from the practice of truth. Hence, truth is so fundamental for building the spiritual life. So it is said in the same tribute in the Mahabharata, Shanti Parva, there is no duty which is higher than truth, no sin more dreadful than untruth. Indeed, truth is the very root of righteousness. Therefore, one should never destroy the truth. You may practice all the virtues in the world, but if you don't practice truth, it is like trying to fetch water in pitcher without a bottom. So, how it is very important to practice truthfulness. Sri Ramakrishna says in the Gospel, by just adhering to truth, you can realize God in this Kali Yuga. No other austerity is required. Even for joke, you should not tell lies. You should not speak untruth. You must pursue the ideal in that force. Master Eckhart says in one place, if he were to be given an alternative between keeping truth and keeping God, he would keep truth and let God go. Thereby he meant that if he kept truth, God just could not go. But if he gave up truth, he could by no means keep God. That's the idea. Beautiful. Sri Ramakrishna teaches that truth alone is the austerity for this age of Kali. In explaining this, he says that in this age, when we are all so much identified with our bodies, we are not capable of practicing hard austerities as people of bygone ages were capable of doing. And without austerities or self-regenerating spiritual action, God can never be realized. So Sri Ramakrishna exhorts us to practice truth in thought, word and deed. The Lord who is Satya Swarupa, or essence of truth, cannot be realized without truth. And we can very well see why Sri Ramakrishna says that truth is the austerity for the ages of Kali. By practicing truth, you automatically practice all the other virtues so important for entry into the life of the spirit. Doubts and objections are of course raised on the plea that is well nigh impossible to speak the truth these days and prosper in the world. If that be your position, well then go and prosper in the world, and take also what goes with it: worry, flurry, pain and problem, going with nervous pleasure. And do not talk of laying the foundation for a spiritual life. What we must remember is that any time, anywhere in the world, it is possible to practice the truth, provided we are ready to pay the price for it. Those who are not prepared to pay the price for telling the truth are not yet ready for spiritual life. No amount of sophistry or knocking with the jackhammer will open to us the portals of spiritual life, unless we are simply and incorrigibly truthful. Let us have the courage to charge our days and nights to conform with the requirements of truth, and not change truth into falsehood to conform with our dark days and hideous nights. So ahimsa, satya. Next comes brahmacharya, continence. The irrevocable truth stands. The more continent we are, the more spiritual we are. And if we want to realize the absolute, we must be absolutely continent. How you will do it is your concern. The truth, however, you can't change to conforming with your weakness. The continent person is a ruler of his psychophysical organism, whereas the non-continent man is the slave of his psychophysical organism. These are simple statements of facts, which we must be bold enough to acknowledge as facts. Do not bring down the ideal, says Swami Vivekananda, but dare to rise up to it. Continence means conservation of energy. This physical energy, when conserved, is transmuted into what is called ojas, spiritual energy. One who has ojas develops a new power of comprehension and of the will. And with that power, it does his spiritual work. The simple fact is, the more energy you spend for purposes which man shares with lower animals, the lesser will be your leftover energy for higher purposes. The spiritual speaker must accept these facts to begin with. Then even the married couple, by Lord's grace, can find their ways of gradually living a continent life. The other two virtues one is required to practice are asteya and aparigraha, that is non-stealing and non-receiving. One who steals not only overtly but covertly, not only in a blatant manner but also in a subtle way, does so through avarice, greed, temptation, and many other degenerate impulses which are anti-spiritual. The aspirant desiring to lay the foundation of a spiritual life must have nothing to do with stealing. We are also advised to practice non-receiving. Non-receiving here means to desist from such receiving for which you have not worked, or which leads you to obligation or degrading self-selling. Something of the giver comes to you in a subtle way with a gift you receive. You know very well what is happening to Indian's soul by having to receive even loans, not to speak of gifts. You lose the content of independence, which is the direst of calamities, and that creates bondage. You lose a little of your independence when you receive a gift. If you go on desiring so, after a while upright, straightforward action, practice of truth becomes impossible. The path to freedom is not through losing freedom stage by stage. Hence, non-receiving is advised to the aspirant who is a seeker after liberation of the spirit. The idea is, the spiritual aspirant must not desire anything. Why should he want a gift? He should question like that. Now it should have been clear to us why Patanjali says yama, or practice of non-violence, truth, non-stealing, continence and non-receiving of gifts, are the universal great vows. Sarubhava Mahavrata it's called. Those who are sincere aspirants in spiritual life and want to squarely lay the foundation for a spiritual life must practice yama to begin with. In spiritual life, sometimes there may be windfalls. Lord's special grace may descend on you in an unreasonable way. You may receive the grace of an almighty man of the Spirit. But it also may not happen. He is a foolish man who depends on windfalls and does not work for himself on sure grounds. What we have said so far, one can do for oneself and prepare the grounds in life, like an honest farmer. Then somebody comes along the way and tells you in a definitive manner what next you have to do for building the spiritual life. And who is this somebody? This somebody is the Guru. Those who have received the grace of their Guru have almost everything on hand. So, we should think very seriously about laying the foundation of spiritual life to make this spiritual life successful. Page 874. He then went to the top of a hill and cried aloud, "Repeat this mantra and you will realize God." Doctor said, "Yes, Master. But you must remember one thing. When his soul feels restless for God, a man forgets the difference between good water and ditch water. In order to know God, he sometimes goes to good men, sometimes to imperfect men. Dirty water cannot endure an aspirant if God's grace descends on him. When God grants him knowledge, he reveals to the aspirant what is good and what is bad. There may be hollows on the top of a hill, but they cannot exist on the hill of the wicked ego. Only if it is an ego of knowledge or an ego of bhakti does the pure water from the sky collect there. It is true that the water from a hilltop may flow in all directions, but that is possible only from the hill of the ego of knowledge. One cannot teach men without the command of God. After attaining knowledge, Shankaracharya retained the ego of knowledge, not to teach mankind, but to lecture without realizing God. What good will that do? I went to the Nandan Bagan Brahma Samaj. After the worship, the preacher gave a lecture. He gave a lecture from the raised platform. He had written it at home. As he read from the manuscript, he looked around. While meditating, he opened his eyes from time to time to look at people. The instruction of a man who has not seen God does not produce the right effect. He may say one thing rightly, but he becomes confused about the next. Samadhyayi delivered a lecture. He said, God is beyond words and mind. He is dry. Worship him through the bliss of your love and devotion. Just see, he thus described God, whose very nature is joy and bliss. What will such a lecture accomplish? Can it teach people anything? Such a lecturer is like the man who said, my uncle's cowshed is full of horses. Horses in the cowshed? All laugh. From that you can understand that there were no horses at all. Doctor said smilingly, nor cows either. All laugh. In the meantime, the devotees who had been in a rapturous state had regained their normal mood. The doctor was highly pleased with them and asked Yam about them. Yam introduced to him Paltu, the younger Naren, Bhupati, Sharat, Shashi, and the other youngsters. About Shashi, Yam said, he is going to appear for the BA examination. The doctor was a little inattentive. Master said to the doctor, look here, listen to what he is saying. The doctor heard from Yam about Shashi. Master said to the doctor, pointing to Yam, he instructs the school boys. Doctor said, so I have heard. Master said, I am unlettered and yet educated people come here. How amazing. You must admit that it is a pillar of God. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. The doctor had been sitting there since 6 o'clock watching all these things. It is 3 hours he is sitting. Girish Chandra goes straight to the doctor. Well, sir, does it ever happen to you that though you do not intend to come here, you are drawn as if by a subtle force? I feel that way. That's why I am asking you. Doctor said, I don't know whether I feel that, but the heart alone knows the promptings of the heart. To Sri Ramakrishna he said, besides, there is not much use in speaking about it. Let us stop here. Any questions? So if you are not laid the foundation, try to think of laying the foundation for spiritual life. Without laying the foundation for spiritual life, how can you think of developing your spiritual personality? So it's very important. Understanding spiritual ideas, what Sri Ramakrishna said, applying them in daily life. Focus on your personal life, that's important. All our attention is outside. So our attention should be to the extent that is required. The rest of attention should be within ourselves. How far I am trying to establish myself in spirituality. So the more we focus on these spiritual ideas, the better. And finally we become peaceful and happy. And Ganges is really splendid in summer. It gives a very good feeling, and you will feel tremendous spiritual atmosphere, and all the spiritual, serious-minded people be associated on that occasion. So it's quite nice if you can chant the name of the Lord and His glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean and quench that mighty forest fire, worldly lust raging furiously within. Own name stream down in moonlight on the lotus heart, opening its cup to knowledge of thyself. O self, drowned deep in the waves of His bliss, tasting His nectar at every step, bathing in His name, that path for weary souls. Various are thy names, O Lord, in each and every name thy power resides. No times are set, no rites are needful for chanting of thy name. So vast is thy mercy, how huge then is my wretchedness, who find in this empty life and heart no devotion to thy name. O my mind, be humbler than a blade of grass. Be patient and forbearing like a tree. Take no honor to thyself, give honor to all. Chant unceasingly the name of the Lord. O Lord and soul of the universe, mine is no prayer for wealth or retinue, the playthings of lust or the toys of fame. As many times as I may be reborn, grant me, O Lord, this steadfast love for thee. A drowning man in this world's fearful ocean is thy servant, O sweet one. In thy mercy consider him as dust beneath thy feet. How I long for the day when an instant separation from thee, O Lord, will be as 1,000 years, when my heart burns away with its desire, and the world without thee is a heartless void. Prostrate at thy feet let me be, in unwavering devotion, neither imploring the embrace of thine arms, nor bewailing the withdrawal of thy presence, though it tears my soul asunder. O thou who stillest the hearts of thy devotees, do with me what thou wilt, for thou art my heart's beloved, thou and thou alone. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. May all be free from dangers. May all realize what is good. May all be educated by noble thoughts. May all rejoice everywhere. May all be happy. May all be free from disease. May all realize what is good. May none be subject to misery. May the wicked become virtuous. May the virtuous reign tranquility. May the tranquil be free from bonds. May the freed make others free. May good betide all people. May the sovereign righteously rule the earth. May all beings ever attain what is good. May the worlds be prosperous and happy. May the clouds pour rain in time. May the earth be blessed with crops. May all countries be freed from calamity. May holy men live without fear. May the Lord, the destroyer of sins, the presiding deity of all sacred works, be satisfied. For he being pleased, the whole universe becomes pleased. He being satisfied, the whole universe feels satisfied.